I went back to my childhood home 2 months ago. My mom was sick, and I was there to help. I thought digging through old memories would help me feel better. I hadn't been to my treehouse since I was a kid. I still thought about it a lot, though. I walked into the backyard. The treehouse looked different. It was more decayed, but somehow still standing. The wood was gray and peeling. I climbed the old ladder. It creaked with every step. Inside, everything was dusty. I looked around and found old toys scattered about. I picked up a broken action figure. Suddenly, I felt a cold draft. I shrugged it off. People always said I was just imagining things. While I cleaned, I found a dusty notebook in a corner. When I opened it, I saw my childhood drawings. They were scary. One showed a figure with hollow eyes standing in shadows. I don't remember drawing it. The pages had strange notes in my handwriting, too. One entry mentioned a visitor who played games with me at night. My heart raced. Why did this bother me? Was it just my imagination? I thought about leaving, but something kept me there. As time passed, I felt a chill. I noticed shadows moving outside among the trees. I shook my head, telling myself I wasn't a kid anymore. I shouldn't be scared of anything. That night, I heard a noise outside. At first, it was just rustling, but it got louder. I convinced myself I was being paranoid and went back to bed. But then the noise turned into the sound of branches snapping. I got up and peeked out the window. The trees seemed to dance in the dark. I rubbed my eyes, trying to convince myself I needed sleep. My heart raced. The next day, I returned to the treehouse. The feeling inside was worse. I found my toys rearranged. A teddy bear I thought I'd tossed in a box was now sitting in the center of the room. My breath quickened. I stepped outside, trying to push away the anxiety. It had to be a coincidence, right? That night, I heard laughter in the distance. It sounded like a kid's laughter. I froze while looking up at the treehouse. I felt cold, like a hand had brushed against my neck. "Who's there?" I called out. No one replied. I shut my eyes, convincing myself it was just my imagination. The final straw came the last night I spent there. I tried to ignore everything. Suddenly, I heard a whisper. "Mark." I froze. I turned slowly, and my heart sank. Nobody was there. I bolted outside, and the laughter seemed to follow me. My feet pounded against the ground. I could hardly breathe. Now, I'm back at my mom's house. I can't shake the feeling. Maybe I imagined everything. I don't know. But as I lie in bed, I wonder, what was that visitor in my treehouse? What did it want? I still feel it lingering in my thoughts. I tried to forget about the treehouse after returning to my mom's place. My days were filled with hospital visits and watching her sleep. Each time I left, I felt the pull of the treehouse, but I ignored it. Life was overwhelming enough without adding ghostly memories. One afternoon, while my mom rested, I poured myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table. I opened my phone and started scrolling through old photos. Then I came across one of me and my best friend, Eric, playing in the treehouse. We were smiling, carefree. But looking closer, something chilled me. In the background, lurking just beyond the doorway, was a dark figure. A shadowy shape I hadn't noticed before. My heart raced. I felt like I was being watched. "That's strange," I muttered to myself. I couldn't remember Eric ever mentioning anything unusual about our time there. Why hadn't I noticed it before? Later that evening, I decided to call Eric. He answered quickly. "Hey, Mark. How's it going?" His cheerful voice felt like a taste of the past. "Hey, Eric. I found an old picture of us in the treehouse." I took a deep breath, trying to sound casual. "Did anything weird ever happen to you there?" There was a pause on the other end. "Weird? Like what?" He was clearly taken aback. "Like, did you ever see or hear anything strange?" I pressed, hoping he'd remember something that could explain my own experiences. "Now that you mention it, I do remember a couple of things," Eric replied. His voice lowered. "There were always noises. Sometimes it felt like someone was watching. But we were kids. I thought it was just our imagination." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "Did you ever think it was something more?" "No, man. We were just kids imagining things," he reassured me. but I could hear uncertainty under his words. As night descended, I sat on my mom's porch, the cool air nipping at my skin. The memories of the treehouse swirled in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever haunted that place was tied to something larger, something I didn't understand. Then I heard it. A crash echoed from the direction of the treehouse. My heart leaped. I felt the urge to run, but I stood frozen for what felt like forever. Then the laughter, a familiar, childlike laughter, floated through the air, drifting towards me. My breath hitched. No one else was supposed to be there. Without thinking, I grabbed a flashlight and sprinted toward the treehouse. When I reached it, I hesitated at the base of the ladder. The door stood slightly ajar, creaking in the wind like it was inviting me in. I aimed my flashlight into the opening. That's when I saw it, a glint shining off something in the dark. I took a step back, heart pounding. "What is that?" I whispered. But the silence swallowed my words. I had to find out. As I climbed the ladder, the shadows deepened around me, and I felt like the darkness was closing in. I didn't understand what was pulling me closer, but one thing was clear. I had to know. What waited for me inside was a question I almost didn't want to answer. The moment I stepped inside the treehouse, a chill raced down my spine. The air felt thick, almost alive, and the flashlight beams sliced through the darkness, illuminating dust motes swirling like memories that refused to settle. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. What was the glint? I asked myself, but there was no answer. The wooden floors creaked beneath my feet as I moved cautiously, scanning the room. My heart thumped in rhythm with the uneasy silence. Then I saw it, a small, rusty key sitting on the floor, catching the light. It looked old, like it had been waiting for someone to find it. Why would a key be here? I picked it up, feeling the cold metal against my palm. "What are you for?" I wondered aloud. But the shadows remained silent. As I examined it, a noise jolted my attention. A soft thump from outside the treehouse. I froze, holding my breath. Was someone out there? My muscles tensed, and I resisted the urge to call out, fearing it might attract whatever was lurking in the darkness. I crept over to the window and peered through the grimy glass. The moonlight barely penetrated the trees that surrounded the treehouse, casting ghostly shapes on the ground. I squinted, trying to see into the shadows. Nothing. Just silence. Yet, I felt that familiar pull again, a presence that made my skin prickle. Then, I remembered Eric's voice echoing in my head. He had mentioned noises, a feeling of being watched, but he dismissed it. I couldn't. Not now. My heart raced again, and I turned back to the inside, scanning the corners where the darkness pooled. What if the shadows had eyes? I shook the thought away. Stay focused, I urged myself, reminding myself I was just looking for answers. I felt the key in my hand again, and a sudden inspiration hit me. What if it opened something? There had to be a reason it was here. I knelt by an old trunk in the corner that had been almost hidden by years of dust. It looked like it hadn't been touched in ages, but the lock on it seemed to beckon. My heart pounded louder as I inserted the key, praying it would fit. It slipped in with surprising ease. With a click, the lock released. The trunk creaked open, and I leaned in, breathless. Inside were old toys, drawings, and a stack of faded letters, all neatly tucked away. I pulled one out, but before I could read it, a gust of wind slammed the door shut. The sudden force sent me tumbling backward, clashing against the wall. My flashlight flickered, then died. Panic surged through me as I scrambled to my feet, heart racing. I fumbled for the door, my breath quickening. The eerie laughter returned, echoing around me, growing closer, filling the confined space. Was someone really here? I pressed my back against the wall, my hands outstretched, feeling for the door. The laughter stopped. The silence was deafening, broken only by my own shaky breaths. What was happening? Then the trunk caught my attention again. It lay open, and something felt wrong. Too wrong. I couldn't shake the urgency that now coursed through me. I needed to know what was inside before whatever haunted this place reached out to me. Just then, I heard a voice, soft, yet clear. "Help us." My blood ran cold. I stared down into the trunk, recoiling in horror. There was something in there. Something that had been hidden away far too long. I took a step back, heart racing. "Who are you?" I whispered, the darkness around me pressing in. As I stood there, uncertainty wrapped around me like a vine. I knew one thing. I had to leave before whatever was in that trunk reached out for me. I had to get out. The laughter still echoed in my ears, an unsettling reminder that I was not alone. I stumbled backward, desperate for the door, but the room felt like it had shifted, closing in on me. The trunk seemed to pulse in the dim light, shadows flickering like they had a life of their own. I reached the door, hands trembling, and yanked it open. The hinges creaked loudly, a protest against my urgency. As I stepped out, I was met by the cool night air. But something was different. The forest that had felt familiar now seemed foreign, twisted and dark. A chill ran down my spine and I heard it again, the whispering. "Help us!" Where was it coming from? It felt closer this time, almost mingling with the rustling leaves overhead. I turned and ran down the rickety steps, the wooden planks creaking under my weight. I couldn't shake the feeling that those red-flecked shadows were stalking me, but I didn't dare look back. The ground beneath my feet felt uneven, and every step amplified my fear. And then I saw her. A pale figure standing underneath the treehouse, her hair flowing like smoke around her. Her eyes were hollow, but somehow they glimmered like the moonlight. Her mouth moved, forming words that barely reached me. "You have to help us!" "Who are you?" The words slipped from my mouth, but my voice sounded so small. She pointed towards the trunk, her arm outstretched. "The letters. What letters?" I took a step back, my instincts screaming at me to run. The last thing I wanted to do was go back. I almost turned, but a sudden gust of wind whipped around us, as if trying to push me closer to her. "Find the letters." Her voice became urgent, almost a plea. "They hold the key." "Key?" I stammered, glancing downward at the small, rusty key still clutched in my fist. "What do you mean?" But she didn't answer. Instead, she started fading, her form becoming blurry like a reflection in water. "No! Wait!" I took a step forward, feeling frantic. This wasn't a game anymore. I needed answers, not ghostly figures disappearing into the night. But all I was left with was silence. The excitement I felt earlier was replaced with dread. I turned back towards the treehouse, torn between diving in or sprinting away to safety. My mind raced. The letters? What did they hold? I glanced back at the pale figure, but she was gone. Did any of this even happen? My heart thudded against my ribs. I didn't want to look inside that trunk again, but I needed to know. "Keep going," I whispered, steeling my resolve. I tightened my grip on the key, knowing I had to face whatever was waiting inside that trunk. As I stepped back into the treehouse, the door creaking ominously behind me, I froze. The trunk was now closed. Panic surged again, and I tried to pry it open, but it wouldn't budge. I found myself staring at the trunk, knowing something was just beyond my reach. The air thickened, and I heard her voice again, now clearer. "Help us, before it's too late." I felt the urge to scream, but no sound came out. What had I gotten myself into? I reached for the trunk again, my fingers trembling. I was losing it. I could almost feel the whispers wrapping around me, taut as a string waiting to snap. My heart raced as I let out a shaky breath. "Why won't you open?" I muttered to it like it would respond. Just then, I noticed something unusual. The light pouring in through the small window caught on the surface of the trunk. There were markings, etchings barely visible until now. They swirled in strange patterns, almost like they were alive. I leaned in closer, trying to decipher their meaning. Without warning, I felt a cold gust of wind sweep through the treehouse. The sound of the branches scratching against the wooden walls heightened my anxiety. It was different than before. This felt more aggressive. "Find the letters." The ghostly figure's words rang in my ears again, this time more urgent. My eyes darted around, looking for any sign of those letters, whatever they were. Maybe they were hidden somewhere in this cursed treehouse. I stepped back from the trunk and scanned the room. Dust motes danced in the air, settling on broken toys and aged furniture. My gaze fell on an old bookshelf lined with dust-covered books. I approached it, feeling the weight of unseen eyes. With each pull of a book, I dug through memories. They all felt wrong, like echoes of laughter stuck in time. Just as I was about to give up, I brushed against something hidden behind the last book. I pulled it out, revealing a small yellowed envelope. The seal was cracked, and a chill ran through me as I held it up to the light. I hesitated. What was inside? But the whispers grew stronger, more insistent. I felt that tugging urge again, the need to discover what was hidden. With trembling hands, I broke the seal and opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in jagged handwriting. The words were unsettling and disjointed. They took us. The letters bind us. The tree holds our fate. As I read those words, a sense of dread washed over me. I dropped the note, letting it flutter to the floor. My heart raced again, but this time it wasn't just fear. It was something darker, an understanding that something was indeed wrong, very wrong. Suddenly, the trunk emitted a low groan, as if it too was awakening. The air thickened around me, and a shadow flickered at the corner of my vision. I turned just in time to see a dark figure standing at the back of the treehouse. My breath caught in my throat. Then, without warning, everything went silent. The wind stopped, and the whispers faded into an eerie calm. I felt a chill run up my spine. Something was about to happen. I took a step back. Who are you? I barely managed to whisper, dread settling over me like a heavy blanket. Silence was my only answer, but that was enough to send my heart into a frenzy. Then the figure stepped forward, revealing a face I recognized. Or maybe I didn't. "You shouldn't have come back," they said, their voice hauntingly familiar. "What do you mean? I didn't choose this," I cried, feeling the walls close in on me. "We're bound to this place," they replied, and the words echoed louder. "And now, so are you." The air around me crackled with tension, and I realized I was in deeper than I ever intended. Before I could process what was happening, I felt the ground shake beneath me. It was now or never. I had to find out what those letters meant, and fast. The figure took another step forward, and the shadows around them grew darker. I squinted, my heart pounding against my ribcage. "What do you mean we're bound? Explain." But instead of answering, the figure only shook their head slowly, their features fading into the darkness. Panic clawed at me. I had to get out, but my body wouldn't move. A force held me in place, locking me in a moment that felt like a ripple stretching into eternity. Then came the sound, a low thud, repeated, like a heartbeat echoing in the ground beneath me. It wasn't just the trunk. The entire treehouse seemed alive. The walls creaked ominously, and I turned my gaze back to the trunk. The markings had begun to glow, faintly at first but growing brighter, pulsing in rhythm with the thuds. "Those letters," I whispered to myself, desperately trying to remember the hastily scrawled note. "The letters bind us." What letters? I hadn't seen any letters except for the one in the envelope. Without thinking, I rushed toward the trunk, the ghostly figure still standing there, almost a sentry. I knelt down and pressed my ear against it, hoping for answers. It felt cold and unyielding, but I could hear something beneath the wood, a whisper, softer than the wind but urgent, like muffled voices calling me. My fingers brushed over the glowing markings, tracing their intricate paths. As I pressed a little harder, a warm surge met my touch. A small compartment popped open at the top of the trunk. I hesitated, torn between fear and curiosity. "Please, don't," the figure said softly, their voice now imbued with emotion. It was almost like a plea. "What do you want from me?" I shouted at them, frustration bubbling to the surface. "Why are you here?" But the figure didn't speak again. Instead, they morphed into a ripple of shadows, fading into the background as if they were nothing more than a mirage. "Damn it!" I cursed under my breath, then turned back to the trunk and dared to look inside the compartment. My heart raced as I peered in. A bundle of old parchments lay at the bottom, each marked with strange symbols and scrawls. But right in the center was a small red letter. "Maybe this is it," I muttered, feeling an odd mix of anticipation and dread. Not just any letter, but the letter that could explain everything. I reached down, gripping it tightly. Just then, the ground shook harder. I felt as if the entire treehouse might collapse under the weight of whatever was happening. The glowing markings flickered wildly, and the thuds continued, sounding almost like a chant. My instinct screamed at me to get out, but I couldn't leave without knowing. I took a deep breath, tearing open the letter. As the seal broke, an icy wind swept through the treehouse, howling like a banshee. The last thing I saw was the shadows around me rising up, ready to consume everything in darkness. Then, a blinding light exploded from the letter, illuminating the room and my surroundings. I shielded my eyes, feeling a surge of energy rush over me. When I opened them again, everything was different. The treehouse had transformed, and I realized with a sinking feeling that my search for the truth was only just beginning. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Gone was the earthy scent of the treehouse. Instead, a heavy metallic tang hung in the air. I blinked rapidly, trying to make sense of my surroundings. The familiar walls had shifted into a shimmering, translucent surface. I could see through them, like peering into the depths of a foggy sea. I stood up, feeling disoriented. The treehouse was no longer a haven of childhood memories. It felt like a gateway to somewhere else. The thuds continued, louder now, echoing around me like a heartbeat in a hollow chamber. I stepped back, anxiety curling in my stomach. "What is happening?" I whispered, half to myself, half to the shadows lurking at the edges of my vision. The figure had disappeared, leaving behind only the lingering chill of their presence. I felt utterly alone, yet the atmosphere buzzed with an unseen energy. Pushing forward, I observed the glowing symbols on the walls. They were now moving, swirling together in a hypnotic pattern. I reached out to touch them, but something held me back. The air vibrated, and I felt a pull, as if the treehouse itself was alive, inviting me deeper into its mystery. Then I saw it. A figure standing in the corner, barely visible through the shimmering walls. My blood ran cold. It looked familiar, but I couldn't place it. Slowly, I moved closer, squinting to see who or what it was. "Help me," a voice whispered. But it wasn't clear who it belonged to. The person was obscured, features blurred, but I could sense panic radiating from them. That plea brought a fresh wave of fear crashing over me. "I can't," I stammered, suddenly overwhelmed. "I don't even know what's going on." Just then, the thuds shifted, morphing into a disjointed rhythm. It transformed into a more rapid series of beats, resonating through the floor beneath me. Instinctively, I stepped back again, my heart pounding harder. "Stop!" I shouted, desperate to regain control. As if responding to my command, the beating ceased, but the silence that followed was deafening. The glowing symbols paused too, hanging in stillness like suspended droplets of water. An eerie feeling washed over me. This wasn't just a trick of the mind. It felt deliberate. Something was watching. My breath quickened as I recalled the note I had found earlier. "The letters bind us," it had said. What did that mean? Why was I brought here? And just as I started to gather my thoughts, a glimmer caught my attention. In the far corner, I saw another compartment, shimmering with the same energy. My curiosity sparked anew, but so did my fear. What if I shouldn't? I hesitated, torn between the need for answers and the danger of stepping further into this unknown. I took a deep breath, knowing I had to see what lay within. A final rush of uncertainty washed over me as I approached the compartment. That's when I saw it. Something small and dark slipping into the shadows. My heart dropped. I was not alone. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice wavering. But the only response was an echo of my own fear hanging in the air. The quiet felt suffocating. I strained my ears, waiting for any sign of movement, but the only thing I could hear was my own breathing. The darkness in the corner seemed to ripple like water, and I took an involuntary step back, my instincts screaming that I needed to leave. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I remembered the figure that had been so familiar yet obscured. In my mind, I connected that voice. Help me. With the whispers of those shadows. What if they came from the same source? The questions tumbled through my thoughts like a storm. I turned my attention back to the compartment. It trembled slightly, as if something inside was restless. Despite the fear coursing through me, I lifted the heavy lid to peer inside. The shimmering energy swirled around my hand, as if it was both welcoming and warning me at the same time. What lay within took my breath away. An ancient book rested there, its cover embossed with the same glowing symbols I had seen on the walls. It felt wrong, as if it didn't belong in this world. I reached out, fingers trembling, and something within me urged me to bring it closer. As I lifted the book, a low hum filled the air. The energy pulsed around me, wrapping me in a cocoon of urgency. I forced myself to open the book, revealing pages filled with handwritten notes and drawings. But as I skimmed through, the writing shifted, morphing into a language I couldn't understand. Panic flared again. Was I meant to read this? Suddenly the air thickened and the temperature dropped. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, and the heartbeat sound returned, louder than before. I slammed the book shut, startled by the intensity of the vibrations spreading through the floor. "Please, just go!" I shouted into the darkness. Then I noticed the figure again, closer now, almost stepping fully into the light. Desperation filled its eyes, and I felt a mix of fear and sympathy. "You have to help me," the voice pleaded, a wave of urgency washing over both of us. "Help you how?" I asked, half-dazed. I lacked a plan. Not knowing how to help or what I could do sent my heart racing, but that faint glimmer of hope faded as another shadow rushed past me, zipping through the small space. I turned, my blood turning to ice. Whatever was here with me was not just a pair of eyes. I felt it dart around the corners of the room, its presence goading me to flee. Then everything went dark. The walls vanished, the glowing symbols fizzled out, and the thuds morphed into a deafening roar. My heartbeat echoed in the void, and I stumbled, disoriented. "Get out!" the figure screamed, though I no longer knew if it was real or just a figment of my terrified imagination. As the darkness engulfed me, a new terror surged. I felt something cold brush past my arm, and I knew I was not alone anymore. I blinked in the darkness, panic setting in as I tried to gather my thoughts. The cold sensation lingered along my arm, wrapping around me like a chilling embrace. I groped in the void, searching for something, anything, solid. My pulse quickened, and I fought against the rising tide of fear. Suddenly, a dim light flickered somewhere in the distance. I squinted, but it was barely enough to see. Hoping it was a way out, I moved toward it, feeling my way through the heavy silence. As I stepped forward, a whispering sound grazed my ears, serrated and menacing. "Stay," it hissed, the voice ethereal and cold. What does that even mean? I swallowed hard, shaking my head as the soft murmurings turned into a cacophony of unintelligible noises. My heart raced, ideally guiding my feet as they moved against my better judgment. If I could just reach that light. I stumbled into a space that felt oddly familiar. My childhood treehouse, the wooden walls clad in dust. Shadows danced across the old beams, and I could see the silhouettes of familiar toys I once adored. Yet, any warmth or nostalgia quickly disappeared as the whispers intensified. They were layered, chaotic, blending together as if a chorus from some unseen realm. "Help us!" one voice called, softer yet laced with desperation. "Run!" another warned, jagged and urgent. I darted toward the light, needing clarity, needing to feel safe again. As I neared, the figure materialized again, more defined but still indistinct. "You're close!" it cried, its eyes wide, almost pleading. "We're trapped!" Trapped? I felt a growing sickness in my stomach. "What do you mean?" I asked, desperate and breathless. "Release the book," it said, its voice barely above a whisper, almost lost in the howling wind that seemed to surround me now. I ran my fingers over the edges of the book still clutched tightly in my hand. I had felt its energy, but the idea of releasing it filled me with dread. "I can't," I replied, trembling. I felt the weight of the shadows pressing in on me, pushing me closer to a breaking point. "Do you want to be free?" The figure stepped closer. It looked older, haunted, and I recognized the fear mirrored in my own eyes. Before I could respond, the whispers surged forward with a rush of air, circling me like predators. I stumbled back, and in an instant, the shadowy tendrils lashed out, grabbing my wrist. My pulse thundered as I fought against the grip. As I yanked away, the figure lunged for me, desperation carved into its features. "You must trust them!" it screamed. Then everything twisted, and I was spun around in a whirl of darkness. The light flickered again, more volatile now, casting a sickly glow over the room. My heart dropped as the temperature plummeted. I couldn't tell where I stood. Then I saw it. A face peering through the shadows, eyes glinting with malice and hunger. Panic clawed at my chest. I wasn't just feeling the fear, I was being hunted. The darkness pulsed around me, and all I could hear was the frantic sound of my heartbeat matching the rhythm of the oppressive whispers swirling in the air. The figure was still there, its features hazy, but its eyes pleading with me to make a choice, not just for myself, but for whatever was trapped in this abyss I had stumbled into. "Trust them," it reiterated, voice firm yet trembling, as if it knew the path out lay nestled somewhere between truth and illusion. In a moment of defiance against the shadows threatening to swallow me whole, I gripped the book tightly, feeling its otherworldly energy vibrate against my skin. "I can't just let it go," I shouted, my voice hoarse. "What if it only makes things worse?" The figure stepped closer, shadows flickering around it like restless spirits. "Only you can break the cycle," it pressed. "That book binds us. Love, loss, it keeps us here. We can't find peace, and neither can you." For a moment, the words hung in the air, resonating with my own hidden fears and doubts. My childhood memories felt like a suffocating weight, dragging me into the depths of despair. But an inexplicable instinct urged me to listen. "I don't want to be trapped," I admitted, my breath coming in ragged gasps. "But what happens if I release it?" I could see the anguish in the figure's eyes, the unresolved pain stretching across endless days and nights. "Then we can leave. It's the only way." "Leave?" A flicker of hope ignited within me, but the shadows hissed, drawing closer, swarming with a chilling fury. I had to make a choice. Taking a deep breath, I made my decision. "All right," I said, steeling myself. "I'll set you free." I stepped into the glowing circle of light that enveloped us, raising the book as if presenting my offer to the very essence of the darkness itself. The whispers crescendoed into a storm of noise as I grasped the book's cover with both hands, feeling an overwhelming surge of energy wash over me. I could sense the conflict brewing in the shadows, a desperate unwillingness to let go of their hold. But the figure behind me murmured softly, "Now, let it go." The moment I released the book into the glowing void, a blinding light erupted from within, exploding outward like a shockwave that reverberated through the very fabric of reality. The darkness recoiled, momentarily stunned, and I felt the feeble cinders of fear begin to fade as I was thrust into a flash of brilliant clarity. Voices filled the air, familiar, strange, and haunting. Through disorientation, fleeting memories of laughter and sorrow flashed before my eyes as the figure stood resolute near the trunk, energy swirling around it. They seemed ready to join the tapestry of whispers and shadows, an amalgam of voices woven throughout time. As I closed my eyes, the warmth of the light enveloped me, and I felt the weight of the world slip away. Then the whispers quieted. The shadows receded into the nooks and corners of the treehouse, forming a new reality that shimmered with possibility. I opened my eyes to the renovated space, stripped of its ominous energy. Instead, it felt light, renewed, almost alive. "Did it work?" I gasped, searching for the figure. "Are you free?" But in the place where the figure had stood was only the fluttering remnants of a presence, now nothing more than a sigh in the breeze of an open window. Standing alone, still shaken, I took a deep breath to steady myself, fear and uncertainty swirling like the remnants of the shadows. I felt the absence, the weight of what had existed, the lingering sensation of being watched retreating into nothingness. Yet, there remained an unsettling ambiguity. Was it truly over? Had I really saved them? Or was this merely a reprieve? a cycle poised to repeat itself in the quiet corners of memory? That was the question that clung to me as I stepped out of the treehouse. I glanced back at the tranquil silhouette, wondering about the echoes of the past that remained trapped within its walls, waiting for someone else to search for answers. And as I returned to my childhood home, I realized this experience had changed me. I moved on, holding tightly to the lessons hidden within the shadows. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling, both a relief and a lingering unease, that the mysteries of the treehouse would never fully fade from my life. Even now, I find myself glancing back at the memories, those hollow eyes and the faint laughter drifting through the trees, whispering questions I may never fully understand. I sometimes wonder if it's wiser to leave such things unexplored. But for each answer I've found, another question remains, waiting to emerge like a specter from the depths of the unknown.